The Rangers cut 16 players and trimmed their roster to 47. Were there any surprises in the bunch? Plus, what does the future hold for Ryan Lindgren?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1146 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. So I want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I want to go ahead and dive into today's episode by talking about a recent round of roster cuts made by the New York Rangers from their training camp roster. Now, it is Monday evening as I'm recording this, so it's entirely possible that between now and the time this episode drops, we could have a couple of more cuts. If that does happen, we'll talk about that in the next episode, and we've also got some more preseason games on the way as well. But I do want to talk about this first batch of players that were cut here. A presser going out, press release rather, by the New York Rangers announcing that 15 players have been cut. There has since been a 16th player added to that list, and we'll get to him in a second. But the original 15 players that were cut here in alphabetical order: Maxime Barbashev, Carter Berger, Brett Boogel, Johnny Evans, Blake Hillman, Blake Jenkins, Case McCarthy, Blake McLaughlin, Jake Murray, Chase Pauls, and Ryan Seedham. That whole group of players right there, all assigned to the Hartford Wolfpack. Then you also had Nathan Aspinall, Raul Bouliard, and Noah Van Vliet returning to their respective junior teams. And then finally, Kalle Väisänen will return to his European club. And I believe less than 24 hours after this press release went out, we also got another announcement from the Rangers PR Twitter handle that a 16th player would also be cut from the team, and that would be goalie Hugo Olas. We saw him play in the two-game rookie series for half of the second game against the Philadelphia Flyers, but no surprises. He's not going to be making the team, and will be heading to the Hartford Wolfpack. So for everybody keeping track at home, and I know everybody's keeping very meticulous track of this, that leaves us now, as of this recording, with 28 forwards, 14 defensemen, and 5 goalies still in camp for the New York Rangers. And as far as this list of the players that got cut here, there's nothing that was like earth-shattering or like really, really surprised me. But there was one player that I thought was at least somewhat of a surprise. Not so much that he didn't make the team. I never expected that, but that he got cut this early in the game here. And that would be Kalle Väisänen. He is a 21-year-old left winger. I thought maybe they would want a little bit longer of a look at Kalle Väisänen as, the preseason continues here. I thought maybe he would get into at least one preseason game just to see how he does. But for anybody that needs a refresher on Väisänen, 6'5", 194 pounds, a former fourth round pick by the Rangers back in 2021, going number 106 overall. He has not put up big numbers in Liga. He played 58 games for TPS last year and scored just 9 goals, had just 5 assists. He was also a -9, then had another 4 points in 9 playoff games. He also, for what it's worth, got a little taste of Hartford Wolfpack hockey last year, played in 3 regular season games with them, in addition to 1 playoff game, did not have a point in any of those 4 games. But again, former 4th rounder, great size, has pretty good speed as well. Kind of an interesting blend. I don't know. I just got the feeling that they would have him stick around a little bit longer than they did. And like I said, at least insert him into one of the 6 preseason games here. I don't think there would have been any harm in doing that. I also realized that there's only 6 preseason games. You got a boatload of players in camp, and there's only so many slots available on any given night. You got to get your veterans and your star players ready to go. You got to get a look at some of your, players that are kind of on the roster bubble, guys trying to make the team, guys trying to get into the opening night lineup. You've also got, prospects who are knocking on the door of playing in the NHL. You got to get those guys some reps as well. So I understand it, but I thought, Väisänen might have been worth at least putting into one preseason game just to see how he fared. For what it's worth, he also scored during the 2-game rookie series against the Flyers, what I thought was probably the prettiest goal of that 2-game set there. He had Bryce McConnell Barker, in the neutral zone, making a cross ice pass for Adam Sikora. Sikora went up the right side and then passed back to his left in deep to Väisänen. Väisänen was crashing the net, redirected the pass into the twine, and scored a big goal there. If I'm not mistaken, I want to say that was the game-winning goal. Or no, that was the game-tying goal in Game 2, because that's the game that the Rangers ended up losing. But Väisänen scored there, although he will no longer be part of the Rangers for this training camp. Like I said, he's going to be heading back to play in Europe. As far as other surprises from this bunch here, I would also give an honorable mention to center Raul Bouillard. Bouillard was a fourth-round pick by the Rangers this season here in 2024, went number 119 overall. Although I will admit, I probably just answered my own question as far as why he was cut early, because he was just drafted a couple of months ago here. He is just 18 years old, and it's not super surprising. They're probably with him thinking that he's just not ready to play in an NHL game, even if it is the preseason, and he's better off, going on his way and getting some more seasoning. And I'm sure the Rangers feel like he's probably at least a few years away from being NHL ready. But worth pointing out, he had a big season with the QMJHL last year, 22 goals and 40 assists in 68 games, so right around the point per game territory. Also had another 8 points in 17 playoff games. But like I said, nothing overly shocking here in terms of the amount of players that the Rangers cut here and which players were on the list. This is how it goes. You guys know the drill. We'll go through the preseason here. More practices, more preseason games to come. And as we go along here, more and more players will get cut and not make the team. They start with a whole boatload of players in training camp, and obviously they're not all going to be here. So very curious to see how it plays out going forward and who ultimately ends up making this Ranger team. Obviously, the further you go in the preseason, the more and more difficult these decisions are going to become. And then eventually we'll be down to 21, 22, 23 players, whatever it might be, on the Ranger roster heading into opening night. So always fun going through the entire, preseason here and just seeing how the whole thing is going to shake out. But we're going to shift our attention elsewhere in just a second. I want to continue our best and worst case scenario series that we do every single offseason. Today, we're going to be focusing in on Ryan Lindgren, who certainly faces an uncertain future with the Rangers, although we do know he's back for at least one more season with the Blue Shirts. We're going to be discussing Ryan Lindgren in great detail and what the future holds for him. Could he still sign an extension? We're going to discuss all that here in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. All right, we definitely want to thank everybody, as always, for checking out the Locked On New York Ranger podcast, the everydayers, the people that are with this podcast throughout the entire hockey calendar every season. Really does mean a lot. Rangers going to be back in action against the Islanders on Tuesday night, the second preseason game, the second of 6 preseason games. The puck drops at 7 p.m. for that one. Probably, I haven't seen the roster yet as far as who's going to be active for this game, but the smart money would seem to be on most of the guys who did not play in the first game. They'll probably be out there for the second preseason game. We'll see if there's any exceptions to that rule, but definitely looking forward to seeing what a lot of the Ranger regulars can do against the Islanders. We shall see. But for right now, let's go ahead and, like I said, continue our best and worst case scenarios, our offseason series that we do every year. Today, we're going to be focusing in on Ryan Lindgren. So we'll start with the bad stuff. We'll end with the good stuff. Always a nice way to do it. Ryan Lindgren in a worst case scenario, I think for him, because I get the feeling that Ryan Lindgren wants to remain a New York Ranger. I don't know this for sure. I don't know him personally, but this is all he's ever known. I realize he was drafted by the Bruins, but he never played for them. He's only ever played in the NHL with the New York Rangers. Obviously, he's been a part of a lot of success. He's always been in a top 4 role. He's always been out there with his buddy Adam Fox, and the Rangers have been knocking on the door of possibly winning a Stanley Cup championship. So everything else being equal, I get the feeling Ryan Lindgren, if he got the same exact offer from the Rangers as he got from 2 or 3 other teams, I get the feeling he would stay with the Rangers. The problem there is that I just don't know that that's going to happen. I don't know that the Rangers are going to be the team that kind of takes the leap of faith with Ryan Lindgren and signs him to a multi-year deal worth, a decent amount of money, you would have to think, to keep him in the fold. And I think in a worst-case scenario, the best way I can summarize everything that I just said there is that maybe the decision has already been made as far as Chris Drury and the rest of the Ranger front office is concerned. Now, I don't think they would ever set anything in stone when a player that is still under contract for one more year and, is going to be back playing hockey and being a part of a team that the Rangers obviously hope can win a Stanley Cup championship this upcoming season. But I do wonder sometimes if Drury in the front office, they signed Lindgren to the one-year deal, worth a good amount of money. $4.5 million for 1 year is not bad at all for Ryan Lindgren, but the hesitancy to go to multiple years, that makes me think that it's at least possible that behind the scenes, Chris Drury, other members of the Ranger front office had decided that this is it for Ryan Lindgren. Maybe not 100%, but I do wonder if they're in the 90 to 95% range that, okay, once this season ends, we're going to let Ryan Lindgren walk. And if that was the case, I don't think there's any reason why they would let Lindgren in on those plans. I don't think he would know about it. Maybe Ryan Lindgren sees the writing on the wall and he's fully prepared to test free agency and perhaps sign somewhere else next offseason. We will see. But I think in a worst case scenario, it's at least possible that decision, although not completely set in stone, has mostly been made behind the scenes, once again, by Drury and the Ranger brass. I think also in a worst case scenario is that we start to see some signs of the wear and tear that Ryan Lindgren has accumulated over the years here. It's funny, when we do these best and worst case scenarios, I always do my best to stay away from injury scenarios because I think you guys can all figure this out. That in a worst case scenario, this player would get injured. But in the case of a Ryan Lindgren, I think it at least needs to be brought up. I do think there's times in the past where his injury history has been somewhat overstated. There's only one season where he ended up missing, significant time with an injury, but he's always banged up. There's always bumps and bruises. He'll come out of the game and then he'll go back out there, may miss a game here and there. But he does play such a physical style. And he's not that big, for as much of a throwback player and a blue collar player and an old school player as Ryan Lindgren is. He's not necessarily the biggest defenseman out there. So you got that to deal with too. Not only does he play this physical style, but he's outsized by a lot of his opponents during a lot of those, high speed collisions that he tends to get into. And I just feel like in a worst case scenario, he is only 25, but in a worst case scenario, you'll start to see Ryan Lindgren, those signs will be at the surface a little bit more often than they have been in the past. And I'm not just talking in terms of him getting injured again. I'm talking about just in terms of mobility. Not that he's known for being this speed demon out there, right? But just the wear and tear starts to come to the surface a little bit more often than maybe it has in the past. I think in a worst case scenario, that's what could happen for Ryan Lindgren. I think also in a worst case scenario for Ryan Lindgren, you could see a scenario where at some point this upcoming season, Lindgren finds himself get replaced on the top pairing with Adam Fox. Fox and Lindgren, I've been very complimentary of the two of them over the years. They basically have been joined at the hip ever since really they both debuted. Lindgren debuted the one season before Fox did, but he only played in 5 games. For the most part, those two got their careers going at around the same time. And obviously both of them have only ever played for the New York Rangers, despite each being drafted by different teams. But those two have always, like I said, clicked very well together. It sounds like they're very close off the ice as well. But there always seem to be these whispers about maybe you could try somebody else with Adam Fox. And granted, a lot of that seems to be fan created. But I feel like the best place for Ryan Lindgren is out there with Adam Fox. Like I said, they complement each other very well. Fox is the dynamic two-way defenseman. Ryan Lindgren is the old school physical guy, the blue collar guy. And I just feel like with Lindgren, both his effectiveness and also his ice time could take a hit if he's not out there with Adam Fox. Now, as far as where he would go in the lineup, I mean, if they were to split them up, probably the most likely scenario is you would just see Miller flip-flop with Lindgren. So Lindgren would move from the top pairing down to the second pairing, and then he'd either be out there with Jacob Trouba or Braden Schneider. That's not a bad spot for Ryan Lindgren either. I'm sure he could make that work. But I think Ryan Lindgren, in terms of ice time and just making as big of an impact as possible on the game, Adam Fox is the guy that he wants to be out there with. That's just my opinion on that matter. As far as, Ryan Lindgren being in a situation to succeed, to me, that's being out there with Adam Fox. So I'm going to keep everything rolling in just a second. Going to shift our attention to some of the best case scenarios for this upcoming season for Ryan Lindgren, including the possibility of an in-season contract extension. I don't think that will happen, but it's not completely off the table either, and we'll talk in greater detail about that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Indeed. We are driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate is not to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with quality candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed data survey. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, going to go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Going to close out today's episode with the best case scenarios for Ryan Lindgren. A couple other little things, little quick notes at the end of today's episode to come as well. But for Ryan Lindgren, in a best case scenario, I hinted at this one just a second ago, an in-season contract extension. Don't rule this out. The Rangers are always open for business when it comes to mid-season contract extensions. Now, again, not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, I don't think that this will happen with Ryan Lindgren. I get the feeling the Rangers are content to let him play out his deal and cross that bridge when they get to it in the offseason. And I do think this probably will be Lindgren's final season with the Rangers, but we're going to talk more about that in just a second as well. But that doesn't say, that's not to say that I'm giving up all hope, or I don't think it's all possible that Ryan Lindgren signs an extension in the middle of the year. As I mentioned, Rangers are open for business when it comes to that. We've seen guys like Hedl, Brodzinski, Jonathan Quick last season, Jimmy Vesey, Ben Harper. All these guys signed in-season contract extensions to remain members of the New York Rangers. So with that said, it certainly doesn't mean that it can't possibly happen with Ryan Lindgren either. Something else is a quick side note here while we're talking about contract extensions. Igor Shesterkin, there's a report from The Athletic the other day that said that if the Rangers and Igor cannot and do not come to a contract extension agreement before the season begins, then it's very likely that one will not happen during the season. It sounds like at that point, once the season starts, and I don't know if this is coming from the Rangers or Igor or both, but it sounds like at that point, contract extensions talks will be put on the back burner. It will not happen during the season, or it likely will not happen during the season. But getting back to Ryan Lindgren here, again, not expecting this to happen, but if history has told us anything, recent history, the Rangers will sit down and negotiate with you during the season. They are open for business if you're looking to sign a contract extension. So it's at least possible. I think also in the best case scenario, Ryan Lindgren continues to be one of those guys that gets the Rangers going. Clearly, this is somebody that's a very well-liked, well-respected player, plays his heart out every single game, will not hesitate to throw the body, will not hesitate to block shots. Somebody that goes out there and gives it everything you've got every single game. I know there's certain players on the Rangers where, people look at them, and sometimes it's not unjustified. Sometimes it goes a little overboard, but there's certain players on this Ranger team, and you guys know that at times will come under fire from certain members of this fan base for not really having it in fifth gear. Ryan Lindgren is not that guy. Ryan Lindgren is always going full bore every game, every shift, and you need guys like that. You need glue guys. You need guys that lead the way from a physical standpoint. I think Ryan Lindgren is certainly that guy. And in a best case scenario, he will continue to be that guy for the Rangers, at least for one more year here. Because again, his contract situation is murky at best and uncertain at best. But for one more year, I think you're going to see Ryan Lindgren go out there and just wear his heart on his sleeve every single game, every single shift. I think also in a best case scenario, you'll see Ryan Lindgren set a new career high in points. I realize he's not exactly his defense partner, Adam Fox, out there when it comes to goals and assists. But we saw 2 years ago, Ryan Lindgren set a new career high with points. He had 18 points in just 63 games. Last year, a little bit of a step back there, 17 points in 76 games. But it's funny because, Ryan Lindgren, he's somebody that does divide this fan base at times. And it's interesting because I feel like even the people that maybe aren't like completely on board with Ryan Lindgren and don't love the idea of him getting a contract extension with this team, it's not because they completely dislike Ryan Lindgren or they don't think that he has any value or that he's not a good player for this team. It's more so that they just don't think that he's a good bet to age very well. And there's some merit to that, of course. And they don't think that he does anything so excellently that he can't possibly be replaced. And it just comes down to, the cap situation. You can't re-sign everybody. That's a concept that we've certainly talked about in the past, and we'll continue to talk about it in the future, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, I do see some people with Ryan Lindgren, the people that maybe want to see the Rangers move on from him after the season. One of their talking points, not their only talking point, but one of their talking points is always that he has zero offensive skill. I don't really agree with that. I mean, look, not every defenseman is going to be an offensive stalwart, but when Ryan Lindgren has the puck, he's certainly not lost with it. He tends to make smart plays. He's not a dynamic puck handler or anything like that. But we're talking about somebody who, again, just 2 years ago, 18 points in 63 games. That's not too shabby. And yes, some of that is probably the byproduct of being out there with Adam Fox. When he's your defense partner, you'll luck your way into some assists. And if you're out there with Fox, there's a good chance you're out there, with some of the Rangers star players as well, Panarin, Mika, whoever might be out there. But yeah, I mean, Ryan Lindgren, I think in a best case scenario, can easily beat his career best of 18 points. And a lot of that might come down to his ability to stay on the ice. We shall see. Something else, and in a way, this episode has all been building to this best case scenario for Ryan Lindgren, but I think also in a best case, you will see Lindgren win another Stephen McDonald Heart and Hustle Award, Extra Effort Award, and I'm very much looking forward to that award. I do every season, the Stephen McDonald Extra Effort Award. Most of you know the story by now. I'll give you the quick version. We've talked in greater detail about this in the past, but Stephen McDonald, former NYPD officer, and was killed in the line of duty, and he was paralyzed in the line of duty, and then years later, obviously passed away prematurely. But yeah, shot during a routine stop, was questioning a couple of youths about some stolen bicycles in the area, and the Rangers have done him a solid ever since then. They've had this award named in his honor. Stephen McDonald himself, when he was still with us, he was able to go out there and present the award, and that was awesome to see him do that. And his family has carried on the tradition since then. But Ryan Lindgren won this award 2 years ago. It basically just goes to the player, and it's voted on by fans, that performs above and beyond the call of duty. So it's a very, there's no stats involved here. It's basically just an eye test and who's going out there and battling every single game and doing everything they can to make sure the Rangers win. Ryan Lindgren won it 2 years ago. Vincent Trocheck won it last year. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I think Ryan Lindgren could certainly win again. You look at just everything that this award is made to represent, and I think Ryan Lindgren, every single season that he's on the Rangers, will be a top candidate for it. I think in some ways, the fans, they're going to be very well aware of the fact that Ryan Lindgren is only on a 1-year contract, and Ryan Lindgren certainly has his fans, and that might influence the voting. I mean, the biggest thing that's going to influence the voting is going to be, who brings it every single night and who does everything they can and gives maximum effort. And that could be Ryan Lindgren based on that alone. But the fact that it's also his final season, or what could be his final season with the Rangers, I could see the fans maybe favoring him a little bit when it comes to the voting. And you could see Ryan Lindgren win this award for the second time in 3 seasons. If he wins the award, it will be very, very justified, very, very well warranted, because he's just that type of player. He's giving you everything he's got every game and every shift. But I will say what I've continued to say as it pertains to Ryan Lindgren. If you're a fan of his, as I am, one of my favorite players on the team, enjoy this upcoming season, because I don't think there's any guarantees that he's going to be back with the Rangers beyond that. I hope I'm wrong, but I also see the other side of it as well. Is he somebody that's like such a hugely awesome defenseman that you have to overpay to keep him? He's probably not. But then you look at the human side of things as well. And, this guy, you look at the Ranger record when he's in the lineup versus when he's not in the lineup, it is staggering ever since he's been a Ranger, how different it is. So there's something to be said for that. And this game has a pulse. It doesn't always come down to stats. It doesn't always come down to metrics and whatnot. Ryan Lindgren clearly has a very, very positive effect on this team. And for those reasons, I'd love to see him stick around, but it has to be for the right cost as far as, cap hit per season. And it also has to be the right length. You can't go nuts with this either. You can't give Ryan Lindgren, I don't think, an 8-year deal, because there are rightly some concerns among Ranger fans, as I mentioned earlier, who worry about how his game is going to age. And I think that's totally justified to have those concerns. So it's a tough one, man. But I'm just going to assume that this is Lindgren's last season. And if I'm wrong and they can get him under contract for a decent amount of time, a reasonable amount of time, not overdoing it, and a reasonable amount of money, then I'll just be pleasantly surprised by that. Because like I said, he is one of my favorite players. So figure we can call it there. I also want to mention that we're going to be doing, right before the start of the season, our very special episode where we read all your stories that you guys send to me. Basically, what we're looking for is for you guys to email me stories about what you were doing, who you were with, how you celebrated when the Rangers won any of their 4 playoff overtime games from this last season's run. It's always a lot of fun to hear all these different stories. Some are hilarious. Some are actually kind of touching in some ways as well. So we have that to look forward to. Definitely looking forward to that. Also want to mention this as well. It looks like the Rangers have announced their schedule of theme nights and group nights for this upcoming season. So I'm going to go ahead. We got a little extra time here today. I'm going to run through all of them so you guys know what the Rangers are going to be celebrating and when they're going to be celebrating it. So to start things off here, on October 26th, you've got Hispanic Heritage Night. On November 12th, Military Appreciation Night. December 2nd, you've got Garden of Dreams Night. January 7th, you've got Hockey Fights Cancer Night. January 26th, you've got Kids Day, which that's a Sunday, and the game starts at 1 p.m., which makes sense because you don't want, little kids staying up until 10 p.m., 11 p.m. or later, whatever it might be, plus however much time it takes you to get home. You've also got on February 2nd, Black History Night. You've got Pride Night on March 2nd, Women's Empowerment Night on March 18th, Fan Appreciation Night on April 17th. And then you've also got a bunch of group nights as well. CYO Night is October 14th, Educators Appreciation Night, October 24th, Healthcare Appreciation Night, November 1st, Firefighter Appreciation Night, November 7th, Law Enforcement Appreciation Night, November 14th, University of Michigan Day on December 8th, Pace University Night on January 9th, Fordham University Night on December 9th, Seton Hall University Night on January 23rd, Syracuse University Night on January 28th, Binghamton University Night on March 5th, New York University Night on March 16th, Law Enforcement Appreciation Night on April 2nd. I believe that's everything. And look, the Rangers, first-class organization. They always do such a fantastic job with all these different theme nights and all these different things that they have going on here. So I'm looking forward to those. I mean, I'm looking forward to every game this season, but whenever there's a theme to go along with it and you honor different people that certainly deserve it, that's always fantastic as well. So looking forward to those games for sure. I figure we can pretty much call it there for today. Once again, if you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well at LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's at LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.